Hello and welcome to the first of our YouTube Open the Book stories. It's good to be with you. I wonder if you like stories. When Jesus was a little boy, there were no storybooks for children. Most people couldn't read, so Jewish mums and dads would tell their stories by passing them down from generations before, ever since the beginning of the world. Jesus told lots of stories himself to anyone who would listen. His stories used to teach people important things. Sometimes he was actually called the teacher. He became famous for his storytelling, and people would come from all over to come and hear him tell his stories. It worried Jesus that people might go away without realising or understanding what the story was supposed to be telling them. So he usually took the trouble to explain the meaning of his stories. So let's open the book to the Bible story called A Tale of Two Houses. See if you can work out what Jesus is saying here.
Two men decided to build a house, one each. They looked around God's beautiful land to find the best spot. The houses needed to be near water and fertile ground, so that the men and their families could grow crops and vegetables and graze their cattle and sheep. Both men thought it would also be good to have a really beautiful view, so that when the day's work was done, they could sit outside, relaxing with their wives, and enjoy all that God had provided for them. The men. Let's call this one Farid. And let's call this one Simeon. Each set off to find the right spot to build his house. Farid quickly found what he was looking for. Good view, near the water. So he collected his tools and set to work. Simeon poked and prodded and hummed and hawed, but he too found a place he thought was just perfect for a house. So they set to work. Farid worked quickly and had the walls half up before Simeon had made his first clay brick. All Simeon had done was to dig a big, shallow pit.
Get a wiggle on, mate. You'll never get this house finished by autumn.
Simeon said nothing. He stared at Farid's house and went back to work on his pit. As he worked, he prayed.
Lord, help me to get this right. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always.
Mate. Oh, your wall's only a metre high. You'll never be done in time for the cold.
Simeon said nothing. He stared at Farid's house and went back to work on his wall. And as he worked, he prayed.
Lord, help me to get this right. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always.
Get a wiggle on, mate. Oh, bit late for roofing now. My house is finished. We're moving in tomorrow. We're going to be snug as a bug in a rug. Oh, you'll never be ready for winter.
Simeon said nothing. He stared at Farid's house and went back to work on his roof. As he worked, he prayed.
Lord, help me to get this right. You know the best way to build a house and the best way to live a life. I will trust in you always.
Simeon finished his house just before the winter storm started. Torrential rains began, and the winds blew, and soon the river rose. On and on it went for days and days. Simeon was glad he'd taken such care with the foundations of his house. He'd made sure he found a flat piece of land with a good rocky base. He'd made his clay bricks and built slowly and carefully, making sure everything was watertight. He trusted in God to show him the best way, both to build his house and to live his life. Then Simeon peered out of his small window, just in time to see Farid's house give its first wobble. The ground was built on seemed to be disappearing into the river. He stared at Farid's house as it swayed and lurched and then fell to pieces with a loud crash. And all that was left of it was a heap of mush on the sliding sand near the riverbank. Sensible Simeon was like the people who listened to Jesus and built their lives on what Jesus told them. Foolish Farid was like those who didn't.
So, did you work out the meaning of that story? Sensible Simeon was like a person who trusted and listened to the wise words of Jesus. That person builds a good, strong life for themselves, just like the good, strong house. So let's take a moment for reflection. Close your eyes. If building a good life means listening to wise words, whose words are we going to listen to? And whose words will we ignore? Now, I'm going to say a prayer, and if you want to make it your prayer, say Amen at the end after me. Dear God, help us to listen to those who have wise words to share, and help us to ignore silly ideas. Amen. So we'll see you another time for another of our Open the Book stories.